interesting stuff today. The coordinator spoke. Football at 4, John McMullen at JF McMullen. Of course, you can listen to Football at 4 every day here on the Sports Bash. And, man, there's a lot of places we could go to kind of start things off here, injury-wise, playing-wise. Let's start, I guess, with Jim Schwartz. And, John, the fact that his defense, now all of a sudden, they were the much maligned side of the ball. What kind of mood is Schwartz in now? I mean, is it noticeably that he feels he's got his group back together now?
Yeah, I mean, I think he feels more comfortable with the corners being out there, which we've talked about a lot. Is kind of ironic because people thought they were the issue and they were just better, speaking of Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby, than the guys behind him. But we see that all the time. People are think the backups are going to be better than the starters, but the starters are the starters for a reason. Oftentimes it's the backup quarterback, but you got to live it at corner, and you see how effective and how important Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, and Avonte Maddox as well in the slot have been to that defense. And I think that has been the key change, and that along with Fletcher Cox starting to play like Fletcher Cox again is a big part of it. But, Jim is consistent, and somebody brought up the Super Bowl again and how they got gashed in the Super Bowl, but they won the game, and that's all he cares about. He'd rather win the game than play well on defense. And it's ironic because they didn't play well in the Super Bowl, but they won. They did play well on Sunday, but they lost. And that's personality of games, which he talks about all the time as well.
Yeah, now you brought up that, okay, their corners were out. Now he has them back. He feels better about that. Is it as simple as that on the other side of the ball? Hey, we get Jeffrey back, Howard back, Lane Johnson back. We're okay.
Well, I think they're a heck of a lot better. I will say that. I don't know. You have to define okay. I don't think it's ever going to be an explosive offense without Deshaun Jackson. I think it's pretty clear they lack significant playmakers, but Jordan Howard would certainly improve that running game. Alshon Jeffrey, I think you kind of see he's having a disappointing year, but and I kind of pointed this out on Countdown to Kickoff with Colin Thompson. I mean, a lot of times good players fight through injuries, and you think they're having bad years, and that's the case with Alshon, and it's true, but it's a heck of a lot better than the alternative. And that's why you need the context of the coaches and when they respect players for doing that and going out and playing through things, even though at times it makes them look bad. Alshon's really important to that offense. And we know how important Lane Johnson is. I mean, generally when he's on the field, the Eagles win. And when he's not, they lose. So those are three big names, three good players. And, yeah, they'd be a lot better with them. I don't think they're going to be explosive. They just don't have that in this offense.
Yeah. The one thing you brought up is the fact that guys hurt, whether or not that's holding them back. We haven't seen the same Alshon. We certainly haven't seen the same Agholor. And I guess the question, you ask a lot is this just the version you're getting of these guys, or is there something that is causing them to be the player that we're seeing this year as opposed to the player that we've seen in the past? Specifically with a guy like Alshon, I think Agholor is just he just is a guy. He just is who he is. He's just an inconsistent guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the Eagles are dying on that hill, and I don't understand why. Mike Rowe kind of defended him again today. I don't know why you defend him at this point. With Alshon, you have a past performance of demonstrated success. I mean, so you can point to the injury in the calf, and now it's the ankle on top of it, and say he's fighting through some things, and that's at least partially the reason he hasn't performed up to expectations. And you hope it's more than just descent as a player. That could be part of it as well. So it could be more than one thing, but at least you have some hope that if he does get healthy and he does get back on the field, that he can get back to what he once was with Agholor. that dog is hunting. I mean, he's done. This is it. This is, the Eagles are going to play him. They made that clear again today. But this is the last year of his deal. He's not coming back.
Is it an indictment almost at this point on the coaching staff, John? Like, where do you stand with Agholor still seeing as much time on the field as he's getting? And I understand the injuries and, they don't have anyone else. But you've been very vocal about putting in Arcega-Whiteside and putting in these guys and giving them opportunities at the same point. But at what point do you say, this guy is hurting us? We would rather have a guy that's not ready, in his rookie year, whatever it may be, anyone else, because this guy is not only not making plays, but in my opinion, he is hurting the team and dragging the team down. I don't care if he's making almost $10 million and the amount of injuries that they have. At some point, you have to coach, and at some point, you have to bench a guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would have done that long before right now, to be honest. I would have pulled the plug on him. I'd be playing younger players. And, not only JJ, Matt Collins, nobody defends Matt Collins. I think he deserves to be out there more than Jordan Matthews. Even guys on the practice squad, whether it's here, Greg Ward, Marcus Green, players, people know Greg. They don't know Marcus as well. You need some athleticism out there. And you should be going through every other practice squad in this league. There are guys on practice squads out there that can give you more than what you're getting in-house. I think it's a big indictment of that coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff. I think it's awful that they trotted Nelson Agholor and Jordan Matthews out there as much as they did against the Patriots. I can't defend it. And more so Matthews than Agholor. He's off the street in week 11, and he's playing 85% of the snaps over your second-round draft choice, a former fourth-round pick a couple years ago, and guys on the practice squad who've been here for weeks and weeks and weeks. What does that say about those players?
What is this?
And by the way, guys, he gave you nothing. He was targeted 6 times, 1 catch for 6 yards.
What does it say about the front office? What about Howie Roseman? What about the staff that makes the personnel decisions? They have to manage the coaches. At what point do they step in and say, Doug, he can't keep this guy out here. Let's give Arcega-Whiteside a shot.
I think there's 2 parts to that, and the personnel part is bad, and that's where you blame Howie Roseman and Andy Weidel and even Joe Douglas, because a lot of the guys on this roster were brought in when he was still here. In the case of Jordan Matthews, that's strictly a Roseman-Weidel decision. That's who you blame. But once they sign these players, they hand them over to the coaching staff, and they do let the coaching staff do what they want with the 53-man roster and the 46 on game day. So that becomes a Doug issue. Why is he divvying out the playing time the way he's divvying it out? So there's a lot of blame to go around, but there is a lot of blame to go around. And you can point a lot of fingers at a lot of people. And I don't know why this, the definition of insanity, everyone says doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I don't know why they keep going to this well with these receivers. I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Now, realistically, if they were to bench Agholor at this stage of the, they did it a couple of years ago, right? They said, look, he had some issues.
16, right?
And they sat him.
After the Seahawks game,
yeah. And they sat him, and then they brought him back. Do they have anybody to replace him? You sit a guy, you bench a guy. A lot of times it's like, well, this guy deserves a spot. Now you're saying, yeah, Arcega-Whiteside or this guy. Evidently, I guess they don't feel that they have anybody that – I guess that's the biggest indictment of all, right, is that they don't feel –
Well, yeah, that's what they're saying by their action. And what I'm saying is Greg Ward, specifically, Mike Rowe defended Nelson Agholor, laughably said he hasn't regressed as a player today. I put the video up on my Twitter account. You can see it at JF McMullen. One of the things he said, the difference between 2017 and now is that Nelson has to wear different hats. In 2017, he played just in the slot. And I think that's part of it because he can't be an outside receiver. But then leave him in the slot.
Yeah, so keep him in the slot.
Exactly.
You just answered it.
Yeah, you would think. But then I will say, I don't think – I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I think Greg Ward can be a difference maker. I'm just saying one guy has played so poorly, you have to try something else.
Right.
That is the point you're at.
Well, and you're almost, you're saying Ward, he was a guy that I think most people would kind of refer to as, I know that we all think the preseason doesn't matter, but when given an opportunity, he caught the football, which is something that this team is struggling to do. And it's not as if, you know what I'm saying? Like he proved something that he could do that no one else is really doing consistently.
Yeah, and hey, look, at this point, you're just trying to get through the season, and you're just trying to win a football game. You're trying to beat Seattle. You're trying to move forward. You're trying to somehow win this division and try to get there the best way possible. They've made their decision. I would go in a different direction. But nonetheless, they got to improve every single receiving position, X, Z, slot, every single one. They don't have the answers on this roster right now. They got to go outside in the off season and completely revamp the position. Problem is, obviously you have Deshaun Jackson. He might fix it. I mean, if he stays healthy, but can you count on that?
Right.
I don't know. You got to pay Alshon Jeffrey. You can't. There'd be a lot of dead money to move on from that. So they're hamstrung from that situation. But obviously, Agholor is not going to be back. Obviously, Jordan Matthews isn't going to be back. I can't imagine Mike Hollins would be back. The only one coming back is JJ because he's a second-round pick. And they told you by all their action, they told you they don't believe in that kid. And it's weird to me. And I've talked about it a lot on this show.
Yeah.
Why you would
well,
give
you see a
up
kid
on
like
somebody
Hardman, second-round pick. Hardman last night is a big part of their offense there. This team last year, John, had Agholor, Jeffrey, Matthews, Ertz. What's different?
I mean, the issue is the same receiver. I don't want to put Dak in that category because.
Well, my point is, you're having the same weapons, and is it just as simple as this is going to be an interesting question. Now, is it as simple as the receivers have just regressed so much, or when the team turned around, you had a different quarterback?
No, the
team was not good, John. The team was not very good, 5-6 with the quarterback. Everything changed. The receivers were the same. They're the same now. It all changed with the quarterback.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. People can criticize Carson, and I'm not going to defend him. He played very poorly against the Patriots, and that's fine. You can point out that criticism. But, being there at the game, you could see, I joked to Tony Bruno and Colin Thompson yesterday. They can sit in the Lincoln Financial Field seats. You look to the right of you, look to the left of you. You would have had more separation than Jordan Matthews got all day. I mean, he doesn't belong on the football field, and he's playing 85% of the snaps in Week 11, his first game back. That is a Doug Pederson problem. Why is he out there? We've talked about Agholor, Mike Rowe defending him today. You've seen it. What is the narrative of this season? If he catches that football, if he catches the football in Atlanta, there was another high-profile drop. I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's been 3 or 4 times where this team has made drops, and some of them difficult. JJ was one of them against Detroit. But you see these kind of catches all over the NFL. So turn on any game. Everyone is focused on the over-the-shoulder catch, Nelson Agholor. There was another throw at the back of the end zone where he just lost his focus on the football field. That's the kind of play That's a throw that Dak Prescott, to use an example, throws to Amari Cooper 3-4 times a game. He throws it 2 or 3 yards out so that only the receiver can get the football. Amari drags the feet, makes the catch. Nelson Agholor is not even close. Is that the quarterback? Hey, if you want to blame the quarterback, feel free. But I wrote about that today because I think it was ironic that the other guy on the field Sunday is literally the greatest quarterback that ever lived. And he looked terrible. Why? Because he's got no weapons. So right. I don't know what you expect Carson Wentz to do with these weapons.
It's such a tough situation, John, because you're right. And it's what we talked about yesterday. It's like it's not a criticism of Wentz, but at the same time, it's like not a compliment or a bailout. You have to hold him accountable, and you have to say to yourself, okay, you understand the situation, and you can't fault him, but you also have to realize and feel like he has a chance to elevate the team and make plays. Just that one play. That's all the Eagles needed on Sunday. Just that one play to get the job done. And then you can point to the Agholor drop, and that's fair. But you mentioned it's a Doug Pederson problem when talking about Jordan Matthews and the amount of playing time that he saw on Sunday. Isn't this whole thing a Doug Pederson problem? Because isn't it essentially on the coach? You talk about Tom Brady. He was brutal, but they won. They were brutal against Buffalo, but they won. And you have to point to the coaching staff and say, these are the tools that you have in your toolbox. Figure out a way to get it done. And week in, week out now, it just feels like it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to point out the deficiencies. I think overall, he's a good coach, and I think that's what you have. You have a good coach, so you have to be very wary of starting. And obviously, the Eagles aren't considering moving on from Doug Pederson, nor should they want to. But for fans who go down that road, there's only one Bill Belichick. So, I mean, you have to ask yourself, sort of like Mike said at receiver, well, what do you have? What are you going to replace it with? And you see all over the league, you see some good coaches who frustrates you because of some decision-making at the end of games at times, or some decision-making with personnel or how they're using particular players. And generally those criticisms can be fair, but then you start thinking, well, if I replace him, I'm probably going to get, I don't know, Taylor in Cincinnati. You know, you see some of these young first-year coaches, they're awful. So I think you have to build on it, and you keep learning. Even Doug, who's won a Super Bowl, and now he's in the second season off the Super Bowl, and teams adjust. And they've adjusted to him, and now he's got to adjust back. And I think he's having some struggles, but I think overall he's a good football coach, and he'll figure it out. And he's better than any alternative you could possibly get. But it's fair to say, yeah, I mean, he was slow to adjust to Lane Johnson leaving. I've mentioned the issues at receiver. I don't know how much he could have done different at running back because Jordan wasn't there and Jay was not ready to go. So I think it's fair to point out the things you're pointing out, but they're also hamstrung by personnel issues.
John, a couple injury things today. Nigel Bradham, thoughts on him this weekend?
Well, Nigel actually talked today, which is interesting because there's no guarantee he's going to play, but he said he hopes to play against the Seahawks. If not, he'll definitely be back the next week. So it's coming around the bend. It could be this week. If not, it'll be the week after. And that'll be interesting because it's going to be interesting to see if Jim goes with Nate Gary and leaves him at the middle linebacker because he's really smart with the communication, and have Nigel be the other linebacker. Remember, he's not really comfortable. He kind of had that role forced upon him due to all the injuries to Jordan Hicks when he was here. And he'd probably prefer not to have that responsibility. or he can put Nigel back at the mic and use Camus, Grugier, Hill. So that's going to be interesting to see how Jim handles that.
All right, Jay Ajayi, do you anticipate first off, I guess we should go to Howard. Will Howard play? If he does play, what's that mean for Ajayi? And if Howard doesn't play, would you anticipate Ajayi having a role?
If he doesn't play,
he straight lied to you last week, Doug Pederson. You asked him, would he be playing, and he said, I would think so.
He did straight lie to me, but in his defense, I knew he was straight lying to me. So there's a give and take, and we get some off the record stuff. But you want some competitive advantage, and you try. Obviously, Bill Belichick's not going to pay attention, but. Yeah, I mean, Miles Sanders just isn't ready to be a lead back, and that's not an insult. He's just a rookie feeling his way, and he still isn't the most confident runner. And you've seen the difference when Jordan took over that role and how effective he was. So if he's not able to go, I think Jay slots right into that role and becomes that lead runner, and Miles takes that secondary role as the change of pace back and the receiver out of the backfield.
All right, and Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, they need him on the field so much. He might be, as poorly as he has played, because of all the issues we just discussed, I don't think there's a more important player to get back on this team. I mean, he's just got to be out there. They need... As I said, they need Jordan Matthews not to play. They're going to die on the Agholor Hill, but you want him in the slot. And then at the other position, it's going to be Mac Hollins, and they're obviously not going to play J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. That's the best you can hope for at this stage, unfortunately.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. It's Football at 4. We do it every day. John McMullen at JF McMullen. And, of course, the Eagles getting ready for Seattle this weekend. A very good Seattle football team. It's a team, it's interesting, John, traditionally a terrible road team. And this year they've been a very good road team. So they got to travel across the country and play here in Philly. They got a very difficult schedule coming up. So it should be interesting to see how this game shakes out. We'll break it down all Football at 4 this week. Thank you, Mark.
And real quick, I think that flex helps the Eagles because, remember, this got flexed out. And
it was an 8:30 game, right? It's now a 10 a.m. game for them, a 1 o'clock game for Philly.
So I think that's a little help for the Eagles.
All right, keep that in mind. We need all you can get, right?
Need it. Definitely need it.
All right, man. John McMullen back tomorrow.
All right, thanks, guys.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.